Well, good morning. I want to say thank you, Tony, for your sensitivity to the Holy Spirit in sharing that word. And if you are at a place where you feel like there's no hope, let me tell you, first and foremost, reach out to someone. Reach out to someone in this church. We love you, and we want to talk with you and be there for you. Jesus gives us a hope that's beyond any hope this world can offer. But also we need community. That He gave us the church. And so thank you for your word, Tony. And I just want to encourage you, if you're in that place where you feel like you're in a dark place you cannot escape, talk to someone. Reach out. Talk to me. Talk to one of our pastors. But we want to talk with you and pray with you and connect with you. It's good to be back. As I said, we were on vacation, and we got to see some places, that bumper video there, that looked a lot like that were absolutely incredible. We drove around Oregon, and I'm a native Oregonian. I was born in Walla Walla, but my parents lived in Hermiston, and I've lived in like all the corners of the state. We lived on the coast for 5 years, but I saw parts of the state I've never seen before. It was amazing. It was really beautiful. If you want my recommendation on places to go, I would say you need to go to, and I just blanked on the name of the lake, Wallowa Lake. Thank you. Wallowa Lake in the far northeastern corner of Oregon was the most incredible thing I may have ever seen in Oregon. It was incredible. It was beautiful. These mountains rise 9,500 feet out above this lake that's there, and it's just gorgeous. But you got to go see it. Go check it out. But we're talking about Moses, who's this wanderer going through the wilderness. He's never in a place that he would really consider his home. He was born and not long after was raised in a palace, not with his family, not with his mother. Then he spent the next 40 years, or after being raised in the palace, he spent the next 40 years in the wilderness. Then after that, he came back and led the people of Israel back into the wilderness for 40 years. He never was truly someone that felt like he was home, that he had put his roots down. But yet God used him powerfully and tremendously. And so we're going through his story. And last week, Pastor Ty talked about Moses leading the people of Israel through the Red Sea and his deliverance of them from Pharaoh's hand. And so our story picks up. They're on the other side of the Red Sea. The water has closed in over Pharaoh. Miriam sings one of the first worship songs ever. She sings the song. Everybody loves it. They're clapping, they're dancing, they're singing, and they're hugging, slapping each other on the back. They're like, we did it! We did it! We're free! Now what? And they start looking around, and they're like, okay, so I guess now, what happens next? And so they start to kind of wander around, and they realize this isn't as easy as we thought it was going to be, perhaps. Things aren't going quite as swimmingly. They started to run out of their road trip food. Who has road trip food? When you go on a road trip, you got to have the snacks. They ran out of red vines, they ran out of beef jerky, and the trip wasn't as fun anymore. And they started to get cranky. They were starting to feel not as good about how things were going. So if you have your Bibles, we can open them to the book of Exodus, chapter 16. Exodus 16, and we're going to spend most of our time here. So Exodus 16, beginning in verse 1, it says this: Then the whole community of Israel set out from Elim and journeyed into the wilderness of Sin, between Elim and Mount Sinai. They arrived there on the 15th day of the second month, 1 month after leaving the land of Egypt. There too, the whole community of Israel complained about Moses and Aaron. So, they get about a month into the road trip, on the way to the promised land, God's promise, and they start to complain. And as you read the book of Exodus, and you read Numbers and Deuteronomy, you start to realize something. The Israelites are expert complainers. If this was like an Olympic sport, they would be gold medalists. They were so good at it. They found creative ways of complaining. And you notice here, they weren't actually complaining to Moses and Aaron. What were they doing? They were complaining about Moses and Aaron. How many of us, when we have problems, we take the problems and like to talk about it, not actually to take it to the source, not actually deal with it? And so they're murmuring and they're upset and they're frustrated. And so they're really upset. And here's how they complain, starting in verse 3. They say, "If only the Lord had just killed us back in Egypt," they moaned. "There we sat around pots filled with meat and ate all the bread we wanted. But now you have brought us into this wilderness to starve us all to death." So they actually figured that death in Egypt was better than where they were. Not only that, but these were people that were literally, it says, 1 month removed from seeing the 10 plagues of Egypt. They saw the sun be darkened. They saw the water be turned to blood. They saw all these incredible acts of God in nature. And 1 month removed, they're complaining. Not only that, they saw the sea get parted. Can you imagine going to the ocean and all of a sudden, whoosh, just this path opens up through the ocean? They saw that happen. They walked through it. They got to the other side. They looked back. They were being chased down by an army. And whoosh, the water came back and swallowed up Pharaoh and his army. They just saw this happen. And they're complaining that they're all going to die because they're hungry. Not only that, but right before this happens, they were thirsty too. And they show up at an oasis and they find this body of water and they're like, water, finally. And they get to it and it's bitter and it's not good for drinking. And so you don't know what Moses does? He takes a stick and throws it in this oasis water and it turns drinkable. And the entire group of Israelites are able to get all the water they need in this oasis. So God has provided these incredible acts of these miraculous acts. The plagues of Egypt have happened. The Red Sea has been parted. Pharaoh's army has been destroyed. The bitter water has been turned sweet. All these miracles have happened one after another, and they're already complaining. Not only complaining, but accusing Moses of having some sort of like diabolical scheme to bring everybody out into the desert to kill them. They're like, this was your plan to kill us in the desert, wasn't it? You are sick. They're complaining and they're upset and they think he has this sick motive, and they point back to Egypt in their frustration and they say, this land of captivity, it actually wasn't this bad. If only we were there. And they get these rose-colored glasses about Egypt, which is just bizarre. Because it wasn't like just things were rough in Egypt. It wasn't like, oh, the economy's really difficult over here. They were slaves, and not only that, they were genocide victims. Pharaoh and his people were taking their babies and throwing them into the river. This was like the worst possible place to live. And they were going, wasn't so bad over there. My tummy hurts. I'd rather live over there. And so they started to get this things are better off kind of idea. And how many of us, at times, we've been delivered by God, we've been set free, but Satan tries to divert our attention and to make us think, are you really any better off? Are things any better? Were the struggles that you walked away from, have they really been taken away? You know what? Sometimes things are even harder. Sometimes there's even more difficulty, and discouragement starts to weigh us down. That Satan would want us to feel discouragement. And discouragement, though, is one of the ways we can be most quickly blinded to the miraculous works of God. I can have the most amazing day and get one text message, and it turns everything around. I can be just skating through thinking, God, you are just on my side, and I get one text message, and it can change everything. Discouragement pulls us away from the victories that God is doing, the things that God is up to. And so these memories that were so fresh in their minds, just a month away, we're so quick to fail them. And how quickly our memories fail us at the miraculous hand of God, His power working. And the first step to going back to where we were is looking back to where we were. And that's what the Israelites were doing. The first step to going back was looking back. And they were looking back at Egypt. They were looking back at these things, saying, remember what it was like? It wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. And so they start talking about this. And so continuing on in Exodus 16, picking up in verse 4, it says, so then the Lord said to Moses, look, I am going to rain down judgment and fire and brimstone on these people. I hope you guys are reading along. That's not what it says. It says, some people are like, okay, all right. I am going to rain down food from heaven for you. Each day the people can go out and pick up as much food as they need for that day. I will test them in this to see whether or not they will follow my instructions. So on the 6th day, they will gather food, and when they prepare it, there will be twice as much as usual. This is for the Sabbath, as we know. So Moses and Aaron said to all the people of Israel, by evening you will realize it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. By evening, you're going to realize it was the Lord that brought you out of the land of Egypt. So God says, you all have, obviously, very short memories. And I was curious about this. So I looked up what animal has the shortest memory. And it turns out no animals have really that good a memory. No dogs, even apes, they say, have very short memories. The average amount of time that an animal has is about 25 seconds, it said. which surprised me. I thought animals would have a better recollection than that. One of the animals that has the worst memories is a sloth. A sloth can be hanging in a tree and forget that its own arm is its own arm, and will use it to grab onto the other arm, at which point it will fall to its death. They are a tragic animal. I don't know how they still exist. I really don't. But these animals have very short memories. But in the same way, we can have very short memories. God says, it's so quick, you can forget about my provision. You can forget about my miraculous arm doing incredible miracles. And not even 30 days into this trip, you've forgotten. And so God says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the miraculous, not every 30 days. I'm going to do the miraculous not every 2 weeks or every week. I'm going to do the miraculous every single day. Every single day, you're going to wake up and I'm going to provide a miracle for you so that you remember that it was me, he says, who brought you out of Egypt. Each morning when you wake up, it's going to be miraculous things that happen there that remind you it wasn't your own strength, it wasn't your own ability and just do-goodness that got you out of there. It was my miraculous hand. So God says, your memory is so short, each day I will give you a reminder. And so God provides bread for these people. And it was not like they woke up each day and there was a small amount of Wonder Bread sitting outside their tents. This was a huge amount of bread, which was called manna, that they found outside their tents. Scholars kind of estimate that there was roughly 2 million Israelites that came out of Egypt when they left the land of Egypt. That's a lot of people. That's twice the population of Portland. That requires a lot of manna. That's roughly 240 train cars of manna each and every day that they would gather. A huge amount of food every single day. And so God says, each day you're going to see my miraculous hand that reminds you it's not you that does this, but my miraculous hand that does this. So we're going to pick up in verse 13. Let's jump down a little ways here. It says this. So that evening, vast numbers of quail flew in and covered the camp. And the next morning, the area around the camp was wet with dew. When the dew evaporated, a flaky substance as fine as frost blanketed the ground. And the Israelites were puzzled when they saw it. What is it? They asked each other. They had no idea what it was. And do you know what they named it? What is it? That is what manna means in Hebrew, is what is it? They're a real creative group there. So they named this stuff on the ground, what is it? And they go out and they look at it, and Moses tells them, it's the food from the Lord he has given you to eat. These are the Lord's instructions. Each household should gather as much as it needs. Pick up 2 quarts for each person in your tent. So the people of Israel did as they were told. Some gathered a lot, some only a little. But when they measured it out, everyone had just enough. Those who gathered a whole lot had nothing left over. And those who gathered only a little had enough. Each family had just what it needed. Then Moses told them, do not keep any of it until morning. How much of it were they supposed to keep till morning? None of it. But some of them didn't listen, and they kept some of it until the morning. But by then it was full of maggots and had a terrible smell. Moses was very angry with them. Interesting. So you notice in verse 4, what we just read a few moments ago, it says that the Lord did this to test them. It's God's test of them to say, do you trust me that I will provide? Did you notice that? Because if God just dropped all the manna they needed, what kind of level of test or trust is that? But he was doing this to test them to see if they would trust him for tomorrow's manna. Are you with me on this? Is tomorrow's manna going to be there? Do you trust me that I will provide everything you need to be your supply, not just for today, but again for tomorrow? He says, don't hold on to any of it. Don't store any of it away, but trust me for tomorrow. Don't hold on to it till morning. You'll have what you need in the morning. But it says some people still held on to it till the next day because our human nature is to hoard. When we feel like there's going to possibly be a limited amount or something couldn't be there, we hoard it. Look what happened 2 years ago with toilet paper. My dad has passed on to me a really beautiful history of garage sale loving. We love to go to garage sales. And he told me the other day he went to a garage sale and he said, their garage, he said, I can't tell you how much toilet paper I saw in their garage. Years worth. They will be passing it on to their grandchildren, the amount of toilet paper in this garage. We have a tendency to go, there could be a limited amount, so I need it. What if it's not there tomorrow? What if it's not there and I need it? And so we have this security that we want. We want to have a warranty, a guarantee. What if God doesn't come through? We say, God, yes, I trust you. My hope is in you. Ish. No. You know what, God? I do fully trust you. But just in case you don't follow through, I'm going to keep this right here. Just in case something doesn't work out tomorrow, I've got this fallback plan, this backup plan, and we have this other thing. Let me tell you, this convicts me because I'm a person that wants to have that backup plan. I want the ace up the sleeve. You never know what could happen. But God is saying, trust, this is my test for you. Trust me in this, that today I will be enough for you, that tomorrow I will be enough for you. Look what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 6. He's teaching the disciples how to pray. And it's a very short prayer he demonstrates for them. But this is in verse 11, this is one of the things he says. He says, give us today our daily bread. Give us today our daily bread. Now, this is something that doesn't really calculate or compute in our brains, because how many of us have a refrigerator in our home? A lot of us. We have cupboards in our home. Most of us aren't going to go home and open a cupboard and a single moth will fly out or something like that. There's something in there. We have fridges that have food in them. We have things that are there. And as a matter of fact, there's times where we'll go through our pantry and have to clear out some of it because we didn't eat some food on time and it expired. We have so much, but this is a culture where there's not food that is shelf-stable. They don't have refrigerators. And so the daily bread is something they had to trust God with. And so the Israelites, as they're in the desert, had to trust God with not just today's bread, but that he would give them tomorrow's bread, that they could trust him with tomorrow. You see, God's grace, he's trying to tell and express to them, God's grace is enough for today. Do you hear me, church? God's grace is enough for today. And Jesus says, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow has its own worries. Trust me with today. My grace is sufficient for today. Can I trust God with my today? Enough so that I'm not going to worry about tomorrow. Enough so that I don't worry about tomorrow. Not many of us know this, but did you know that Moses wrote one of the Psalms? Moses wrote Psalm chapter 90. And in Psalm chapter 90, he says this. He says this in verse 14. Satisfy us each morning with your unfailing love, so that we may sing for joy to the end of our lives. I think Moses was writing about something very specific, and he says, satisfy us each morning. Each morning for 40 years, Moses saw this manna that was left outside their tents that would satisfy them, that would give them all they needed. You see, God's provision is his guarantee that he will come through with tomorrow's promises. God's provision today is his guarantee that tomorrow's promises, he will follow through. You see, God hasn't brought us this far just to bring us this far. If you can jump to the next slide for me there, Lizzie. God has told us that his provision today is his guarantee of tomorrow's promise. And so he hasn't brought us just to this day, to this far, just to see us this far. In Exodus 14, they're standing at the Red Sea, and God says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to stand still and watch the salvation of the Lord. He didn't tell them to do anything. He didn't say, okay, everybody look for a stick or something sharp. We're going to throw it at the Egyptians. Just see if you can hold them off for a minute. He says, your job is to stand still and watch what I do. And he says, I will do this. And so on the other side of the sea, they get to the other side. God delivers them miraculously. And like I just talked about, water was provided for them. They didn't have to grab shovels and dig a single well. They didn't have to put out tarps and try to gather some sort of water system or anything like that. There was water that was provided for them. He made it drinkable right there in an oasis. Not only that, but the bread was provided for them. On our road trip, we drove through a whole lot of farmland. And in Eastern Oregon, it is barren out there. There is not much rain. And I was thinking about the amount of work it takes to go from a barren field to a sandwich. You've got to plow that field. You've got to prepare the soil. You've got to plant. You've got to irrigate. You've got to fertilize. You've got to harvest. You've got to mill that grain and prepare it all the way to get to something edible. For the Israelites, they didn't have to do a single bit of that. It was dropped at their doorsteps. The manna was delivered to them. So they had all the food that they needed, the water that they needed. The battles were fought for the Lord. God says, just stand there and watch the Lord rescue you. Your job is to stand still. But I'm one of these people that gets busy feet. Can I really trust you, Lord? This is the test he's saying. Do you trust me with it? Yeah. But they failed. And so God says, let me just do the work for you. But yet they didn't trust God, and they failed this test. And not long after God provides this manna for them, does Moses' suggestion box start filling up. The people of Israel have some thoughts and ideas on what's going on. And so this starts to happen in the book of Numbers. It tells another version of this story a little further on. In Numbers chapter 11, verse 4, it says this. It says, so then the foreign rabble who were traveling with the Israelites began to crave the good things of Egypt. And the people of Israel also began to complain. Oh, for some meat, they exclaimed. We remember the fish we used to eat for free in Egypt, and we had all the cucumbers and melons and leeks and onions and garlic we wanted. They had bad breath, I'll tell you that. But now our appetites are gone. All we ever see is this manna. They're sick of manna. They had baked manna. They had fried manna. They had boiled manna. They had pickled manna. They had manna on the half shell. They had pineapple upside down manna. They boil it, mash it, stick it in a stew. They had manna everywhere. They're like, we are so sick of manna. They're like, this is ridiculous. And this is interesting, though, because when we see how tired they get of this manna, who was the group that started this, we aren't happy with the manna? Did you catch what it started there with? A foreign rabble. A foreign rabble. Who is this group that's a foreign rabble? Well, they're actually first mentioned in Exodus 12:38 when the Israelites are coming out of Egypt. The last plague has happened, the 10th plague, and they're all escaping Egypt. And it says that there was a group of foreigners that joined them, not just Israelites. There's this group of people that jump on the bandwagon along with them. Some were Egyptians, some were other nationalities that joined in this escape opportunity. And so they escaped with Israel as they go across the Red Sea, and they're living among them. And as they're living alongside them, they're enjoying all the miracles. They're enjoying the fresh water. They're enjoying the manna. They're enjoying all the provision that God has given them. But they're enjoying it without the relationship. They like the promises. They like the community. They like the hope and the encouragement. We're going to the promised land. They like the music probably. They're like, Miriam can really sing. And they like the structure. But the bread wasn't good enough on its own for them. The manna was lacking, and they're like, we don't like the manna. We need something better. And so they're disappointed, they're frustrated because it wasn't enough on its own. Now remember, we talk about how the Old Testament and New Testament aren't their own things, just doing their own things, but there is a thread that goes through the whole Bible that is one continuous narrative that tells a story. And here's where this is so important, because this manna it carries over into what it means to us today and what it means through Jesus. Check this out. In the book of John chapter 6, Jesus feeds 5,000 people, actually more than 5,000. He fed, that was 5,000 men. That's not counting the women and children. There could have been more than 15,000 people there easily. He feeds this huge group of people with just a basket of fish and chips. It's a miraculous thing. He multiplies the bread over and over, and they're eating, and the people are like, we like this. This is great. And so they follow Jesus to see where he's going, and they catch up with him, and they say, hey, Jesus, you need to do something like that again. Here's what it says in verse 30. They say, show us a miraculous sign. They're telling Jesus this. Show us a miraculous sign if you want us to believe in you. Apparently, feeding 5,000 people wasn't enough. They said, show us a miraculous sign if you want us to believe in you. What can you do? After all, our ancestors ate what? Oh, shout it out, church. They ate what? Manna while they journeyed through the wilderness. The scriptures say Moses gave them bread from heaven to eat. So they say, what can you do, Jesus? Actually, here, let us make a suggestion to you. Do the manna trick. That way we know it's from God. Bring manna down like Moses did, and go ahead and do that for us. And here's what Jesus says. He says, I tell you the truth. Moses didn't give you bread from heaven. My Father did. And now he offers you the true bread from heaven. The true bread of God is the one who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Here's what Jesus says. Jesus says, I am the bread from heaven. You want me to call it down? You're looking at him. I am the bread from heaven. These people around him were just looking for a meal and a cheap magic trick. They were looking for something to wow them and fill their bellies. But that is something that would eventually leave them discontent and dissatisfied. Can I tell you, the 5,000 people that Jesus fed, even though it was from the very hand of God, eventually they were going to be hungry again. Eventually, they were going to be unimpressed by whatever else was going on in the world. Jesus knew this. He said, you want this magic bread to come down from heaven? And he's saying, I am the bread you need from heaven. I am the one that should be your satisfaction. Look what happened to the Israelites in the desert. They saw the very elements change in front of their eyes. Can you imagine water being turned into blood? They saw the sun be blacked out. They saw all these miracles happen. They saw water be split in half like the water bender or whatever. I haven't seen the cartoon, but I've heard about it. And just incredible things. The hand of God moving, and even still they were left empty. They were left, it wasn't enough. The natural world could be manipulated by the hand of God, and it still wasn't enough. And Jesus saw the people that were there were ultimately not looking for physical need. Their real need was spiritual bread. And this is this rabble that's with Moses at the time. They're going, this manna's not enough. And you know what? They were right. The manna wasn't enough. We need the bread from heaven that is Jesus. We need spiritual bread. So Jesus goes on to tell them this. This is what he says. He says, I tell you the truth. Anyone who believes has eternal life. And he says, yes, I am the bread of life. Your ancestors, they ate manna in the wilderness, but they all died. Anyone who eats the bread from heaven, however, will never die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Anyone who eats this bread will live forever. And this bread, which I will offer so the world may live, is my flesh. And that weirded a lot of them out. They're like, this is some weird zombie stuff. I don't get that. Eat my flesh? Jesus is saying, my body that has come to be broken for you is the manna from heaven that will give you eternal life. We will all one day face a physical death. Unless the Lord tarries, we will one day die a physical death. But some of us will have to face a second death that is far more fearful. But he says, my broken body, my death will give you eternal life one day. My broken body will give you life for eternity, that you can enter eternity into heaven with the Father. And Jesus tells them, there's something even more important and miraculous you need, and that's me. More than physical bread that fills satiates your hunger, you need me. And Jesus says, I need to be your satisfaction. And that's the question for us today, is Jesus alone your satisfaction? Or like the rabble, are we going, got anything else? Got anything else? I'd like some garlic and leeks, please. And Jesus says, I need to be your everything. I need to be your everything. Have you fixed your life around Jesus? Is he not just your emotional fix? Is he not just it's not just the community perks of being around him or this and that, but the bread of life, has it become your satisfaction, your very salvation? And Jesus says, I need to be your bread of life, more than just fixing something that patches up your life, but actually fills the void that says, there's something more I need. He says, I am that thing. Is Jesus your full satisfaction? So this morning, before we go on, I want to give you this opportunity. If you have been trying to fill in that void with all kinds of things, maybe you've been looking for the hand of the miraculous, maybe you've been looking for something that just makes you feel good, that satiates that emotion or that void in your heart, but it's left you empty, let me tell you that Jesus is everything. He is the bread of life. He is all we can hope for, and He is all that can give us eternity, and it's in Him. So at this moment, I want us to do something. Without any music playing, without anything else, I want us to bow our heads and close our eyes. And if you have been seeking your satisfaction, your fulfillment in life and other places, you've been hunting around and it hasn't been found fully in Jesus, let me tell you that He is the answer. And He's calling you to you today. There's many things that we can seek in our world that would try to fill that space in our heart that says, what's missing? Why am I here? What is my purpose? Let me tell you that your purpose is to know God. But the only way we can know God is through Jesus. See, there is a perfect God who created you to be known by Him and for you to know Him, but we have all sinned. We have all fallen short of God and His glory. And because we have a perfect God that cannot associate with sin, because of our free will, we've chosen our own way and we've walked away from Him. But when we recognize that Jesus is the bread of life that can fulfill that area of our heart that's been broken, He can restore us so that we can know God once again. That we can actually have relationship with the one who created the stars. And it's only through Jesus, the bread of life. So if you're in this room and you've never given your heart to Jesus, or maybe you've been far from Him and you've been trying to fill it in so many other ways,